And I beheld heaven open, and behold, a white horse. And he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he's a judge and makes war. We are at
So you better lace your straps up.
and spiritual.
We're at war. So you better lace your straps up.
Man, the hell up this road.
This is war.
We are at war.
So you better lace your straps up.
And spiritual.
We're at war. So you better lace your straps
Man, the hell
up.
up this road. Big tanks, warships, and planted hands with small chips. North Korea, Russian spies, war is at our doorsteps. History doesn't lie, they beat the slaves with horse whips. So I think it's only right we pay them back with small tips. End of time, spoken of, it's gonna get a little warm. Daniel 7 started 8, judgment of the little horn that beat us down, held us back, called us by obscenities. Prepare us a table in the presence of our enemies and pay them back. Worse than that, they argue that the earth is flat. Our babies dying, mothers crying, cities full of murdered blacks. Hispanics too, they hate you too. Edomites are not your friend. Harmless smile behind the scenes. They tracking you through iPhone 10 technologies, through policy. We served them since the colonies. This ain't our rest, my mind is right. This place is hell, I'm not at ease. I swore an oath with every breath. I promise to defend the law. Sword is sharpened, armored up. I'm calling for the men of
This
war.
is war.
We are at is this particular presentation I was saving for an event. Well, I'm working on this. It's a presentation in process or in progress. And this is a presentation that myself and the young phenomenal teacher from Rum Gadal, Wescott, we've been talking about doing something and giving something to Israel concerning the Bible translations and manuscripts and things of that nature. So I was in the process of putting this PowerPoint presentation together, and a whole bunch of other ones that, we were going to kind of touch on these subjects to help Israelites out a lot. Because what you're going to find is that a lot of opposition to the Bible is because people don't understand the process of how we got the Bible. The Most High did not stretch his long black arm out the sky and hand man a Bible. There was a whole process. You have, of course, you have the people that actually write and receive the word of God, right? You have the scribal process, right? You have the transmission process. You have the translation process, and sometimes transliteration as well, and preservation. So you have all these different bullet points of things that you have to have some cursory knowledge of to understand how the records or the scrolls made it from the time of the apostles to your hands today. There's a whole process behind it, and it's very good to know, right? But another thing that always seems to come up is the fight between those of us that say that we primarily use the KJV versus those that don't. So what I want to start off by saying and make very clear is that we do comparative text. We do comparative text. We are primarily KJV translation teachers, but we do comparative text, right? There are some times in some cases that I could show you, not today, where actually some of the other translations of the Bible give a better rendition of the verse when you look at the Hebrew. There are some places that is true. Those cases are usually in the Old Testament though, right? Like for instance, when it comes to, I'll give you guys an example and I can always demonstrate it another time, right? When you look at that translation that you have, and I know it's 1 Samuel 16 and 1 Samuel 17, right? I'm just winging it now because I'm not going to look for it right now because that's not what this is about. I'm just giving you guys some information. when it speaks about David being ruddy, right? When you go to a place like Bible Hub and you put in the verses where it speaks about David being ruddy, and you look at all the different translations, some of the translations will actually literally use the term dark and handsome. That's what it will say. That's what it will say, which is a better translation to me than the word ruddy, which can be ambiguous. But overall, we prefer the KJV for a lot of reasons. Now, specifically, what we're going to do today is a series that I'm working on diligently, and it's going to take me a while, but I'm giving everybody a preview. I didn't do this PowerPoint. I didn't show this to anybody before, not even in the academy. I didn't, right? But the Spirit led me today to talk about it because this came up in a room I was in on Clubhouse as well. The primary argument that we have with other translations of the Bible is the New Testament. That's where the problem comes in for the most part, right? So the name of the series is called Getting to Know the Translators. If you don't think, listen carefully to what I'm telling you. If you don't think the opinions and prejudices of some of the translators of some of these newer editions of the Bible don't seep onto the pages, you're crazy. Because they do. And that's where the fight comes in between those of us that believe in the KJV and the rest of the translations that come after. Because the rest of the translations that come after, these guys that were involved in the translation process, they were bug outs. I'm going to show you guys that. I'm going to show it to you right now. How many of you brothers and sisters know who B.F. Wescott is and F.J.A. Hort are? Who are these two men and why is it important? Why are you talking to us about these guys? We don't care about these guys. Well, guess what? These guys have a major, major role in some of your modern translations of the Bible. You should familiarize yourself with who these guys are. Because when you get into arguments with people about why you prefer the KJV, this is a great talking point. When you actually know something about those other translations. In the Israelite community, it's too much parroting when it comes to that. Why do you believe in the KJV? Well, it's the most accurate translation to the Hebrew. Everybody says that. That's not the only reason. It's not the only reason why the KJV is the preferred translation. That's not the only reason. Those two devils on your screen, they're part of the reason why the KJV is also a better translation, especially in the New Testament. Those two devils right there are part of the reason why the KJV is superior. I'm going to show it to you. This is a saying that I always say. To know the quality of a translation, you must also know the qualifications of the people that were involved in the translation process. And you have to know their reputation too. Because all of that plays a role. Vocabulary time. What is syncretism? What is syncretism? This is important to know. Syncretism is the combination of different forms of beliefs or practices, right? Definition number 2. The fusion of two or more originally different inflectional forms. So syncretism, brothers and sisters, to make it really simple, deals with fusion. So when you have a certain worldview, and then you get a hold of some records of the Bible, you have a certain worldview, if you fuse the two together, that's called syncretism. Whether you know it or not, some of those synagogues that Paul was teaching in the book of Acts, some of those synagogues, they were practicing syncretism too. These Israelites that were in the diaspora, that had synagogues and stuff, when Paul would go through go on his different missions, his different missionary journeys, and sometimes he would go into these synagogues and preached Yahweh Shai and the gospel to them, some of these synagogues were dealing with syncretism. They were melding Greek culture into Torah practice. They were doing that. It's a fact. When I go through the book of Acts and I get to those particular chapters, I'll show you that too. It's not a new thing. You have a fake god called Serapis. Serapis is a fusion god. It's a fusion of two different gods. Amun Ra. At one time, Amun was one god and Ra was the other, and they fused the two together. It's not a new thing. That's syncretism. Okay, let's keep going. So let's deal with this devil first. This guy is Brooke Foss Wescott. He was born January 12, 1825, near Birmingham in Warwickshire, England. He died July 27th, 1901. Auckland Castle, Durham. He was an Anglican bishop of Durham, England, and a biblical scholar of his time. He was considered a biblical scholar who collaborated with Fenton J.A. Hort on an influential critical edition of the Greek text of the New Testament. That's why I told you the fight really is with the New Testament. He collaborated with Fenton J.A. Hort on an influential edition of the Greek text of the New Testament. That text is called the critical text. We're going to get to it in a while. It'll make sense in a while. Just be patient. This is new information for a lot of people. Some of you guys have heard me talk about this before, so bear with the folks that this is new to them. I'm going slow for a reason, because I understand, especially when it comes to history, people can get lost real quick if you talk real fast. So understand, he collaborated with another guy, and they came up with an edition of the New Testament that's based on the Greek. It's called the critical text. That's important. We'll get to why later. Then you have Fenton J.A. Hort, born April 23rd, 1828, Dublin. Died November 30th, 1892, Cambridge. English New Testament scholar who produced, with Brooke Foss Wescott, the guy in the slide right before, a major critical text of the New Testament. Okay? These sources come from the Encyclopedia Britannica. You guys can actually go and read more about these guys, right? I just wanted to go there. Okay. Now, I'm giving you guys the cheat code, right? These are some helpful books. These are some helpful books, right? That book, The Final Authority, I've recommended it on this channel umpteen times. It's a great book, although it does have some bones, but it is a great resource that gives you so much information on the translation, transmission process, etc., all the different manuscripts that exist. And it actually even goes into comparing the manuscripts and why some manuscripts are better than others. That book is practically 400 to 500 pages long. I don't know who nowadays has time to sit down and read a book that's like that long. But what I've done, for the most part, I've failed a few times, is that when people get the book, I usually will give them the cliff notes of what pages to go to get what you need. Now, I can't do it for everybody. So at one day, maybe I'll just do a simple YouTube video going through this book and showing you guys what you need if you choose to go get it. It's very cheap on Amazon, but if enough people go looking to order it, it will not be cheap anymore. I paid, when I bought that book, I paid $7 for it. Probably right now it's somewhere in the 20s. And if 20 people was to go get it, the algorithm is going to boost it up to like $50 or whatever. But it is excellent in breaking a lot of that stuff down. Another book that I use as well is a book you guys can see right there called The Heresies of Wescott and Hort, right? Pretty good book as well. This is some of the places I go to and I do my research, which then leads me to primary sources. You read those books, but then you go to the bibliography and find out where they're getting their information from, because that's really the key. How do we know that these authors right here are speaking truth? You know that the authors are speaking truth because you go check the bibliography. So you can't do that when you're reading a website. That's why they devalue reading books and want to give you all these websites and all this other stuff. No, the important stuff is in the bibliography. Just like if you're going to go to Wikipedia or you go to Britannica, you got to go to the bottom and see what sources they're using and go to the primary. That's important. So when you go to the primary, right, the aforementioned books led me to the primaries where we can actually learn about those two men, Wescott and Hort, in their own words. So you guys can see the book on the left is called The Life and Letters of Brooke Force Wescott, right? And it was written by his son, Arthur Wescott. So his son literally published his letters. So this is a primary. This is the man speaking in his own words. We don't have to lie on him. Okay. Then you had another book that was printed called The Life and Letters of Fenton John Anthony Hort that was published by his son. I got these primaries where they're speaking in their own words from reading books like these. So it's a lot of reading and a lot of researching and a lot of time, but it's important because I have to teach the people, right? Because these questions come up. And these stupid, not really the Christians in this particular case, these stupid conscious community Negroes think that they have something on you by bringing up certain things. So you have to be ready to answer. Because these sort of things can be a stumbling block to somebody. All right. Before we get into those primary books, I want to watch a little bit of a video here. And the reason why I want to watch this video is because there are some important things that you brothers and sisters need to know. And the reason why you need to know it is because we just read something a few slides ago. We read that Wescott and Hort, hold on one second. We read that Wescott and Hort, they were involved in putting together something called the critical text, right? That's what we read. The critical Greek text. They were involved in putting that together. And I told you, brothers and sisters, we were going to explain what that is because that is extremely important to know. This video is going to give you guys a brief explanation of what the critical texts are. Let's go.
And the main target is the crowning achievement of the Protestant Reformation, which is, of course, 1611 authorized King James Holy Bible. That is the fruit of the Reformation that the Jesuits want to destroy above all, because until they do that, they cannot be sure of getting, indeed, the entire world, and especially England, back under the thrall of the popery.
And real quick, Salakia, Salakia about that. Real quick, I want to just land back on what he just said. Remember, who was it that the gunpowder plot, where they tried to blow up Parliament and King James, who was responsible for that? It was the Jesuits. It was the Jesuits. Guy Fawkes was a Jesuit. So he's correct in what he's saying. Let's go.
Entire world, and especially England, back under the thrall of the popery.
18 years after the Jesuit meeting in Chieri, a German scholar named Constantine von Tischendorf would travel to Rome for what he described as a prolonged audience with the Pope. 1 year later, Tischendorf arrived at St. Catherine's Monastery at the base of what is called Mount Sinai in Egypt. Here, he discovered a manuscript that he claimed was more ancient than any of those used by the reformers. In time, and after further visits to the monastery, the manuscript he found would be named Codex Sinaiticus.
I got to explain that. So I'm going to go back a little bit. I have to explain that so you guys understand. I got to do it for the people that are new here that don't know what I'm talking about. The manuscripts, and it's in upcoming slides, but I'm not going to wait. The manuscripts that underline the New Testament in your King James Bible, which comes from the Reformation, is a set of manuscripts known as the Textus Receptus, or the received text. Those are the texts that are used in your King James Bible, right? So what you're watching in this video is that you had some people in the 1800s that came across some manuscripts in Egypt. And when they found these manuscripts in Egypt, they said these manuscripts are older than the Textus Receptus that the KJV used. That's what they said, which is BS, but I don't really want to focus on that right now. So I want everybody to be on the same page. They found a set of manuscripts in Egypt, and those manuscripts were named Codex Sinaiticus. The difference in a lot of your Bibles today is you have one group of Bibles, the New Testament is based on the Textus Receptus. And another group of your modern Bibles is based on Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus. So the argument is between which manuscripts are right and which ones are wrong. That's what the argument is happening right now. You got to notice. You have to notice stuff. It may not seem like you need, but you need to notice. You can't be religious when it comes to this truth, because somebody might ask you these things and you're going to be stuck. What makes the KJV better? Because it uses the Textus Receptus. Codex Sinaiticus, Codex Vaticanus is trash. Don't worry. They're going to tell you in this video why it's trash. The video is going to tell you why Codex Sinaiticus and Vaticanus are trash. Listen.
Tischendorf arrived at St. Catherine's Monastery at the base of what is called Mount Sinai in Egypt. Here, he discovered a manuscript that he claimed was more ancient than any of those used by the reformers. In time, and after further visits to the monastery, the manuscript he found would be named Codex Sinaiticus. Oddly, it had more corrections or changes in it than any other manuscript in biblical history.
That's the problem. Did you hear that? I'm going to go back and play that again. Can't let none of that slide past you. You got to be paying attention with your ears pointed up. What did he just say? Look at the picture next to the video right here. What do you guys see? You see the whole page is practically blackened out, with just a couple of places where it's not blackened out, right? I just use this as like a meme. What they're telling you in the video is this manuscript that was found in Egypt that purportedly is of the New Testament. There was so many markings in it. There was stuff that was scratched out and somebody wrote over it. There was so much changes in it because somebody was messing with it. Does everybody understand? Somebody was messing with that thing over time. Remember, these manuscripts are not the ones used in the KJV. These are the manuscripts that's used in your NIV and these other translations. Hope everybody understands that. That's the argument. And these are the manuscripts that Wescott and Hort pushed. These corrupt manuscripts. That's what I'm trying to show you. Listen again.
Oddly, it had more corrections or changes in it than any other manuscript in biblical history.
Tischendorf claimed there were some 14,800 corrections.
How many? How many corrections? Say that again.
There were some 14,800 corrections done in the manuscript. Is that true?
It sounds about right. Sinaiticus is the most corrected manuscript of a Greek manuscript of the scriptures.
The Textus Receptus, the Greek manuscript used for your King James Bible, does not have this problem. Nobody was sitting there crossing stuff out and changing stuff. None of that stuff. That's important to know. Y'all pick it up on what I'm showing y'all. That's super important to know. It's not just a mantra that we just say, hey, the KJV is better. No, there's reasons.
Years later, after Tischendorf published the manuscript, a copy would be presented to Pope Pius IX. The Pope would send a letter in which he expressed his highest appreciation of the publication.
Why is that? Why did the Pope highly appreciate the publication? Because the popes were against the KJV being translated. Remember, at the beginning of your Bible, everybody at the beginning of your KJV Bible, the introduction speaks about the Pope interfering with what they were doing. The Vatican never wanted that published. Never. The ones that came before King James, when you talk about Erasmus, the Catholic Church gave him a problem. When you talk about Casiodoro de Reina, that used the Textus Receptus, they gave him a problem. And they gave the translators in King James a problem too. They did not want that to come out. So now that they have these new manuscripts with all these markings and marked out and corrections, the Pope is like, great, that's the one we're going to get behind. Understand that.
About this same time, a second manuscript emerged from the Vatican Library, named Codex Vaticanus.
Did y'all catch that? All of a sudden, magically, after they found this first manuscript in Egypt, right? Now, all of a sudden, the Vatican finds its own manuscript down somewhere hidden away for hundreds of years. All of a sudden, they go into the Vatican Library, and wouldn't you know it, they have their own version of the New Testament too. Did y'all catch that? Listen again. Listen again. And all of this is to be in opposition to the KJV and specifically the Textus Receptus.
The publication. About this same time, a second manuscript emerged from the Vatican Library, named Codex Vaticanus, the Vatican Book, also said to be more ancient than the manuscripts used by the Reformers.
Vaticanus now has a very strange appearance. When you look at it as a manuscript text, but although you know that people tell you that it's a 4th century manuscript, it actually looks like a 15th century manuscript.
Did you hear that? Yeah, he's talking fast. He has a British accent, right? But he's talking fast. He said that we're told that Codex Vaticanus is a 4th century manuscript. But when you look at it, he says it looks like it comes from the 15th century, meaning that they made it up in the 15th century. They made it up during the time of the Renaissance, pretty much. That era. They made it up then, but they're telling you it's older. I didn't say that. He said that. Listen. These are the experts, not me. Listen.
Very strange appearance. When you look at it as a manuscript text, but although you know that people tell you that it's a 4th century manuscript, it actually looks like a 15th century manuscript. There's one very simple reason for that, is that almost the entire text has been overwritten by a 15th century scribe.
Did you hear that? I know I keep stopping it, sorry, but this is all pertinent. The reason why he said it looks like a 15th century text and not a 4th century text is because somebody overwrote almost everything. Somebody overwrote almost everything that's in it. Just adding their own words and just writing stuff in. And this is the source that some of your modern Bibles come from. These manuscripts that have things crossed out, things changed, people adding stuff in, blacking stuff out, all that. This is where your modern Bibles come from, not the KJV, but the rest of these Bibles. This is where it comes from. It's not just a mantra that we just say.
The entire text has been overwritten by a 15th century scribe.
Vaticanus and Sinaiticus are the 2 Greek manuscripts that would be embraced in the 19th century as older and more reliable than the texts used by the Reformers. Wescott and Hort combine them into what is now known as the critical Greek text.
Did y'all catch that? So you didn't catch it earlier because it was new. Now, did you catch it? They combined Codex Vaticanus and Codex Sinaiticus. And both of these are erroneous, changed, marked out, tampered with, corrupt manuscripts, and made it all one and came up with what they call the critical Greek text. And that's where a lot of your newer Bibles come from. These devils did that.
Wescott and Hort would combine them into what is now known as the critical Greek text that would be used for biblical translation throughout the 20th century.
So now, if you guys have watched some of my other videos, it's not in here yet. Like I told you guys, this is a PowerPoint in progress. So I'm giving you guys a preview of what's to come. And I've only scratched the surface. If you watch my other PowerPoints, you will know that there was something called a UBS Vatican agreement, right? After Wescott and Hort did what they did, there was a UBS, which is the United Bible Society Vatican agreement. And in that agreement, they decided that they were going to use this new critical Greek text as the basis for all modern translations of the Bible. They were going to take the Textus Receptus and throw it in the trash and use these manuscripts instead that we just learned were corrupt as hell. So the reason why I'm going through this is because don't let nobody say to you, well, why are there so many translations of the Bible? And if it's one, I see this translation, the New International and the New World. You have to know the science behind it. The science behind it in simple form is that they've been trying to get the KJV out of here since it came out. And so by using all these other manuscripts and everything and coming up with all these different translations, they're confusing a lot of the people. Because a lot of the people will not do the research and study to understand this is a game that the Vatican is playing. But I need for my brothers and sisters to be able to express these things when these conversations come up, because you may know somebody that has these questions. And if you don't know today, you might meet somebody that has these questions tomorrow. So I just wanted to fill you brothers and sisters in on these things. Okay? All right. Enough said. I have 28 minutes to get through the rest of this, so I'm going to kind of accelerate slightly. All right? Hey, it's a sidebar. I was taught never trust a man with a woman's name. That's a sidebar. That was something I always learned coming up from the OGs. Never trust a nigga with a woman's name. A nigga whose name is Brooke, yeah, I don't trust you. Brooke is a female's name. I'm just saying. Anyway, real quick, let's go here. I'm going to have to come out of the PowerPoint for a second, right? And let's go here real quick. I'm going to highlight that. Copy, and let's open up a this page real quick. I just want to show you guys something, right? So this is a website. You guys can utilize it at your own leisure, right? These are the Bibles that don't use the critical text, right? The Tyndale Bible. You guys might have heard of William Tyndale, right? The Tyndale Bible uses the Textus Receptus, not the critical text, right? Then you have the Coverdale Bible, the Matthews Bible, the Great Bible, the Geneva Bible, the Bishop's Bible, and ultimately the KJV. And by the way, the KJV, if you do studies, if you go to Zondervan's Bible Dictionary, right? You guys, and most people have Zondervan's Bible Dictionary. If you read the entry on the KJV, it'll tell you that when they did the translation, they kept a lot of Tyndale's work. A lot of what Tyndale did was excellent work, excellent translation, and the KJV translators pretty much kept a lot of his work. What he did was correct. So these Bibles all use the Textus Receptus. And by the way, William Tyndale, if I'm not mistaken, was burned at the stake. All right? So these are the Bibles that use the Textus Receptus. You have to get used to these terms. The Textus Receptus is a different form of Greek manuscripts from the critical text. It's different. The Pope and the Catholic Church have been trying to get the Textus Receptus out of here for centuries. Okay? All right. Now let's come back to the PowerPoint, and we're going to pick it up where we left off. Okay. Let's go to the next slide, right? So again, this is just a little bit of an illustration, right? Like right here, you have the Textus Receptus. You have the Geneva Bible that uses the Textus Receptus, also called the Byzantine text. The KJV uses it. Whereas these manuscripts that were found in Egypt, Codex Sinaiticus, Codex Vaticanus that was found in the Vatican, these Bibles, all your Catholic Bibles, like the Douay Rheims Bible translation, that comes from these manuscripts right here that we all learn today are corrupt for a lot of reasons that we saw in the video. The New American Standard Bible comes from these manuscripts. Your New International Version comes from these manuscripts. And the Christians' favorite, the English Standard Version, comes from these corrupt manuscripts too. And the Christians love the ESV, especially those of us on Clubhouse. We know. They come to the stage, we got to tell them, no, you got to read out the KJV, man. Especially your New Testament. You got to read out the KJV. Because them manuscripts that were used for your English New Testament and the ESV is trash. This is something else I've shown a lot of times. I'm just going to do it right here real quick. It's kind of an aside note, right? This is a translation continuum. It gives you the word-for-word translations are the ones that are over here. And I guess this is like a purplish blue, right? The word-for-word translations over here, meaning the translators literally translated word for word from the Hebrew to English, from the Greek to English, right? These other Bibles over here, right? Your NIV, your NLT, your New Living Translation, right? Your Good News Translation, and all these different translations over here. These are thought for thought, meaning that they did not translate word for word. When you do thought for thought translations, that means that you could put your own opinion in there. Then further along, you have some Bibles that just will paraphrase. So what I'm showing you guys, and I hope it's not too confusing for you, I'm showing you there's a lot to consider when you're choosing a translation. You want to know who was involved in the translation, right? What manuscripts did they use, right? That's what we learned. And also, what translation method did they employ? Did they go word for word like they were supposed to? Or thought for thought like they were not supposed to? And what you're going to find out is a lot of your modern Bible, in addition to using corrupt manuscripts, even when they got a hold of those corrupt manuscripts, when they translated them, they didn't do it word for word. Now you have a more salient and stronger argument for why we prefer the KJV. Let's keep going. Family photo time, right? Everybody knows who Charles Darwin is. Charles Darwin is the father of evolution, right? As he's considered to be like the father of evolution. And of course, you have black people that call themselves the Amun-Ra Squad that love them some damn Darwin, boy. I never thought I would live to see the day. But yeah, Negroes love Charles Darwin. It's crazy. Well, on a personal note, if it's not bad enough that Wescott and Hort used corrupt manuscripts, if it's not bad enough that they didn't even translate those manuscripts word for word, we have to include one other thing from its primary source out of their own mouths. Hort believed in Darwin. Yeah, sure did. Listen, let's start from, let's see what, yeah. But the book which has most engaged me is Darwin. Not the Bible, family. Not the Bible. The book that most engaged this guy that was involved in the translation process of these new modern Bibles, his favorite guy was Darwin. You think that's not important? That's extremely important. Whatever may be thought of it, there's a book that one is proud to be contemporary with. He was proud to be a contemporary of Darwin. I must work out and examine the argument more in detail, but at present time, my feeling is strong that the theory, Darwin's theory of evolution, that the theory is what does that say? Unanswerable. Wait a minute. So the person that's involved in translating your Bible, which does not teach you evolution, is also a person that believes that evolution is unanswerable. I'll let that sink in for a second. This brings us back to what we were talking about earlier about syncretism. How a person's worldview can later on affect something else if they get involved in something else. And in this particular case, this guy was involved in the translation of the Bible. So yes, Hort believed in evolution. But there's nothing wrong with the translations that come from his critical text, right? This is the same thing. I'm gonna skip this right now because time is escaping from me. Okay. Let's deal with Mr. Wescott for a second. Pay attention now. Wescott was an unbeliever. He's an unbeliever. But he helped translate modern Bibles. How does that work? This is on page 52 of the Life and Letters of Brooke Force Wescott. We don't have to make it up. We just got to read. August 11th, James, I do not recollect noticing the second verse ever before in the way I have. How sincerely do I wish that I could rejoice in temptation. I never read an account of a miracle, but I seem instinctively to feel its improbability. That's interesting. You got to stop it. We have to absorb that for a second. So he doesn't believe in miracles, right? According to the Bible, he doesn't believe in miracles. But you were involved in the translation and the correlation of a New Testament that speaks about miracles all throughout the Gospels in the book of Acts. But you don't believe in it. But you're supposed to be our authoritative source to come to you for the translation. Does that make sense to y'all? Is it clicking now why I said that you have to know the translators too? It should be clicking. You have to know the translators too. It's very important. Let's go to the next one. It says, let's see, where do I want to start? It says, this is on page 69, right? It says, no one now, I suppose, holds that the first 3 chapters of Genesis, for example, give a literal history. I could never understand anyone reading them with open eyes could think that they did, yet they disclose it unto us a gospel. So Wescott did not believe in the book of Genesis. Now, what I will say to you is there is allegory in the first 3 chapters of Genesis. There is hyperbole in the first 3 chapters of Genesis, but some of that stuff is literal. When the Most High causes the earth to bring forth the grass and the trees and everything, that's literal. When the Most High tells the animals to be fruitful and multiply, that's literal, right? When the Most High tells Adam to know his wife, that's literal. And I can go on and on and on. So there's definitely literal things that are happening in the book of Genesis. Some of it is indeed allegory. Some of it is indeed hyperbole, but there's also literalism in Genesis chapters 1, 2, and 3 as well. But you have to understand how to separate them all. He didn't believe in any of it. So again, the question is, if you don't believe in none of it, how are you the source that we should come to for a translation? That doesn't make any sense. Furthermore, Wescott was an unbeliever and he didn't have faith. He was faithless. Let's come down here and let's read. It says, I must find out all myself and then I am satisfied. But that simple faith and obedience, which so many enjoy, I fear will never be mine. So we read all about faith and obedience all throughout the New Testament. In the Gospels especially, there's a heavy emphasis on faith and obedience all throughout the New Testament. There is a whole chapter dedicated to faith in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11. And the man that gives you a New Testament manuscript that we should believe and use and believe is accurate tells us he don't even have faith or obedience. Does that make sense to y'all? Again, do you see why it's important to know these guys? That don't make no sense. Let's move on. Another contemporary of Wescott was a woman by the name of Madame Blavatsky. Y'all heard of her before? Some of y'all may have heard of Madame Blavatsky before, and some of you guys may not. But she was heavily into the occult. Heavily into the occult. Guess what? Guess what? So was Wescott. So he didn't have no faith. He didn't have no obedience. He doesn't believe in Genesis. But you know what he does believe in? Ghosts. Listen, this is on page 117 of his book. And this is what it says, right? It says, he devoted himself with ardor during his last years at Cambridge to 2 new societies. One of these was the Ghostly Guild. Hey, family, the guy that gives you the critical text to underline the New Testament of these modern Bibles, that guy was a member of something called the Ghostly Guild. Let that marinate. and other choral societies. The Ghostly Guild, which numbered amongst its members A. Barry, E.W. Benson, H. Bradshaw, the Honorable A. Gordon, here it is, J. A. Hort, right? H. Lord, C.B. Scott, was established for the investigation of all supernatural appearances and effect. Wescott took a leading part in their proceedings. Wescott took a leading part in their proceedings. So he was a leader in the Ghostly Guild, the occult. And he gave you the New Testament for your new Bibles too. How does that work? Oh, there's more. There's more. There's more. On page 176, he says, Plato and Aristotle have wrought that in me which I pray may never be done away with. So he was a lover of Plato and Aristotle on top of everything else. On top of everything else. These are the guys that give you your critical text for your New Testament for all these modern Bibles. Not the KJV, though. Not the KJV. I need for you to understand that. Like I said, now you have more meat, more heft to your argument when we say why we don't really deal with them other translations. We will do comparative text. We will do that. I have no issue with that. I do that myself. But we are KJV primarily for these very reasons. Because we go and we research it like, wait a minute, these guys that's giving us the stuff, these guys were devils.